everyone. Welcome to an awesome Monday. It's 1 o'clock. It's time for some awesome FileMakery stuff. FileMakery stuff? Should put that in the dictionary. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of fmtraining.tv, where we create lots of great on-demand FileMaker video training as well as live stream content, which is what you're at right now, probably. If you're watching this on YouTube and it's not 1 o'clock Pacific time, then it's probably a recording. So today we're going to be doing another broadcast of awesomeness. It's going to be discussing FileMaker Server emergency restoration, which is where your FileMaker Server crashes, right? It's something that, if you ask Claris, our products don't crash. It walks on water. It's perfect in all ways, right? And so as a result, this broadcast has not been authorized by anyone at Apple or Claris. So as a result of that, we also have Jacob Taylor here, who's really good at discussing things and talking about neat things. All right, so let's get on with the broadcast today, the training of the emergency restoration. So last week, I always like to do this, right? You ready to do this? I'm going to switch over here to Jacob Taylor. And I go full screen here. Jacob, if you want to show your screen, knock yourself out. What I always say is last week on Battlestar Galactica, Jacob was fighting the battle, trying to explain to people why they have to have backups. Meanwhile, the Cylons are trying to destroy the database server. Who will win? Tune in this exciting episode, right? Are you ready to go, Jacob Taylor?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah, so we're going to deal with emergency restoration today, and I'm going to try something live on air and see if it works. And that is to simulate, or not actually simulate, but cause FileMaker Server to crash while we're all watching it. So we'll see if this works. That'll make for a much better example for all of you guys. But I've also got a couple of log files that I brought along from actually a couple of our own servers that have crashed recently, basically, so that we can look at different crash scenarios and what that looks like. The big, if you were like in a rush to get out of this, get out of watching, whatever, I'll give you the big takeaway at the beginning. What you're doing with a FileMaker server when it's crashed or you don't know what's happened is you're doing incident response. And so the big thing about that is you need to figure out what has happened. In general, that will mean establishing some sort of a timeline. You'll be able to do that with clients, your coworkers, your whoever the relevant parties are with the server. For a lot of our incident response stuff, I actually don't get on the server always. I start with a phone call, and that's to start asking, for example, it's Monday, in fact, and someone's server went down over the weekend, and so what they did was they shot me an email and they said, hey, I can't get this stuff to come back up. Like, can I get some assistance here? And so the first thing is to get on the phone with them and say, all right, can we establish what happened? And then second, you go and look at the server. And what you're looking for when you do that is you want to confirm the series of events because it doesn't always match. Or you can look at log files that are, they have timestamps on everything. And you can say, well, I can tell from X, Y, and Z that something other than what the client told me may have happened, right? You don't call them liars or something like that. But sometimes there are facts that you can look at in front of you that contradict the narrative you were given, for example. So,
all right, let's try to keep this out of the politics. You're saying we're just saying technology-wise. It's not like political facts and political narratives, and then I can fact check you, right, and determine that aliens have not landed in Los Osos, right? So.
So. We're going to go in here. So I'm going to assume that worked since it looked like it did. I don't know if it went down badly, so we'll find out when I get into the log file here if it did. But basically your first step that was kind of a general interview because you guys need to do all that other stuff as well. But first things first, if you're just the IT guy, you're going to come in and you're going to look at the log files. That's the first most important thing to do. There's a couple scenarios where that basically won't be sufficient, but I'll get to those later. Basically, for most people, what you're going to be doing is you're going to pop open the FileMaker Server event log, and what you'll do is you'll go into this will be wherever it's installed on the server. Right? We installed it on the C drive. Some of our customers put it elsewhere on the system. So you'll go into FileMaker Server. You'll go into logs. We particularly keep like Notepad++ installed on Windows systems. Mac comes with the console application built in, and you can use that for this. The recommendation here, however, is to use something other than the built-in Notepad application in Windows, because that does not deal with large files well. Honestly, once they get over about a megabyte, it starts having problems. So let's see. Oh, perfect. It worked flawlessly. Great. All right. So if you guys want to know what a crash looks like, we got this right here. So what you're going to be looking for is this system will come back up. Hold on, let me restart it. That'll give the most flawless example. So we're going to do restart, and then that'll spit some more logs in here so I can show you what I'm talking about. The thing that you end up looking for because you're trying to identify when the crash happened, and what that allows you to do is to determine because you don't care that much about what time specifically, but what you need to know is specifically what backups ran just before. Because in a crash restoration, your answer to any and all questions is we're restoring from backups. That is your mantra. That is the only thing that you need to know. And so task number 2 becomes determining what the best backup to restore from is. If you only have daily backups or something like that because you're disk constrained or your business doesn't move that fast, that's what you'll be looking at. You'll go back to the last one of those. But in general, RCC particularly will configure potentially up to multiple different hourly backups. Sometimes for some of our customers that have very high-speed systems, we do schedules for every 15 minutes. And so they have to go in, someone, me or somebody else, has to go in and look at the log file and go, okay, when did it crash? That, and 2, what was the last backup that ran that we can tell it ran? And that's a very important thing because you can't always guarantee.
Yeah, can I inject right here a little bit of a historic experience? So Jacob Taylor, actually in the scheme of things, has not been around the FileMaker world that long, but he had a lot of previous heavy-duty IT experience before he walked in here. So he's an example of someone who already knew other systems and learned FileMaker and in progress of more or less becoming, well, he's definitely a senior engineer in this part of the world, part of the conversation. But historically, let me just tell you about FileMaker Server. So I would say a quarter to a third of the time in general, my estimation is that FileMaker, if it's going to crash, will crash right in the middle of a backup or because it's somehow involved in doing something about a backup. So one of the rules of thumb is that you make sure that you've got a good backup. So if it says last backup was run at 12:01, right? And the crash is at 12:02, guess what? Probably that backup it was working on is shot. I would go back to the 11:45, the 11:30, or the 11:15, or the 11 o'clock backup, because the reality is that you don't want to. I mean, if you just want to screw yourself, then just use the file that was already there that got wrecked. But remember, the backups are writing, and if they don't finish correctly or properly, then they're just as bad as a corrupted database or worse, right? So understand that. So if you back up once a day, and the thing tanks in the middle of the backup, you could lose 2 days of work. So understand that it's a risk that you have to assess yourself, very much so. And but I would never, if it's within 10 minutes of a backup and then it blows, you figure, because the thing is, when FileMaker crashes, normally there's a cascading sequence of events you can't see. And if it's anywhere near a backup, I assume that the backup was part of that and it's potentially tainted. And so that's the way I just personally deal with it, just because I don't want to be that guy who was too eager not to save, didn't want to lose an extra 30 minutes or an hour of work because we roll our backups that way. If you're one of these people that backs up once a day, boy, I tell you, I'm glad I'm not in your shoes. That's all I can say, right? Because I don't want to have to explain to the customer, hey, let's just use a crash database, right? So, all right, Jacob, sorry about that, but there you
go. Yep. Nope, makes sense. And I'll say there's even some additional context. I don't know. There's a feature that's disabled by default in FileMaker 19, so we don't need to have an extended discussion about it. But there was a feature that was turned on by default in 18. Just so we're clear, if you have an RCC installed server, it's not turned on. The way when that thing bugged out, there are bugs in it, which is why it's off in 19. What that would look like on the server is it just started getting slower and slower and slower and slower over about a 2-hour period or so. And all of those backups during that 2-hour period were to be scrapped. You can't use them. And so one of the reasons I talk about, you need to talk to the client, figure out, or talk to your employees, whoever the people that use the system are. You have to talk to them and figure out, like, if there was a behavior that happened like that, what the timeline was on it, because you particularly have to go and figure out if that was, for example, if that bug occurred where you get, basically what happens is a record in the database engine gets locked and it is never unlocked. At least that's my understanding of it. It just slowly drags the system down until it goes like molasses. And so but as soon as that thing has been locked, the backups can't run appropriately. And so you have to go before the lock even happened. So it's a little bit of guesswork, but basically you're going back several hours. And any data that got put in during that time, because you're restoring from a backup, yes, will need to be re-entered. And that needs to be communicated to people.
So I'm just inject this while we're at it. FileMaker Server 19 Mac, don't install it. Okay. It's got one or more issues, and we can't. How long can we keep it running for? About 4 or 5 days, Jacob, and then it blows up? Or how's that work?
Yeah. Well, we'll find out this time. It actually crashed the morning after we installed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's bugged out currently, and we're waiting to see if it topples. I'm sure we'll get an alert.
Yeah. So the Mac installation of Server 1804 or V4 or whatever that is, pretty solid, works really reliably. I do have on the Windows side of things a checklist. I'm going to let Jacob drive now, and I'm going to send you folks a checklist. This is a checklist from last week, so it's kind of our Windows installation kind of generic checklist for FileMaker Server 18/19. There's a note in there, the difference between 18 and 19. Mostly identical.
When everyone gets their hands on that checklist, just know in spirit it's Windows and Mac. You'll have to figure out what kind of some of the stuff means because it doesn't quite apply. There's a couple Windows specific things in there as well. But if you have a good head on your shoulders, you'll be able to figure it out. Or you can email me questions or something. So back to the restoration proper. Basically, one of your tasks here is to go and figure out which of these backups is good. And so I wanted to call out this specific section. And if you have more databases, obviously, there will be more lines involved, and you'll have starting to back up, 19 databases, or I don't know, our main server has like 40 or 70 or something. I don't know, tons of databases. And so it's going to have one of these. There's certain of these lines that are repeated, and there's certain of these lines that are not. For example, it'll say starting to back up however many databases it's doing. It will attempt to pause all of the databases at once, and then you'll get lines like this one if there were no changes. Otherwise, you'll get a pair of lines that indicate the backup succeeded, i.e. it did in fact update the file on disk. Those are important to look for. If you really want to be persnickety about it, you want to double check that you see the pairs of the lines when you make a change in the database. You've changed whatever your production file is, users are in it or whatever. So it's paused the database, it successfully backed it up, and it says that it's done. The other final thing is that at the very end, you'll see these 3 lines, which is it deleted if you're running long enough that it is reclaiming old backups, like you're keeping 24 hourlies, for example, and the 25th one needs to go away now because it's been the next hour, you'll see lines like that deleted backup folder line. Those are good just to keep an eye on. The ones that your specific backup ran successfully and is done is these 2 here that I've highlighted. And you'll want both of them. I've never seen, unless it crashes in the middle of the backup, I've never seen it not put both lines. But that's kind of your little green light that says, okay, this one's safe to use, basically. All right, so we have identified, it would have been at the beginning of this, let's see, 2 p.m. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, scheduled for 2 p.m. Sorry, it's the 1:01 p.m. backup, which is correct because that's when we started the stream. All right, so you probably will not see, where is it? It's these lines, basically. because I crashed it and then told it to shut down. So you will probably not see these lines. What you'll see will look something more like. I want to show an example of this. Was it this one? It's this one. So this is actually the 19 crash that we were talking about. So let's see, 0620 at 1:30 in the morning. There it goes. All right, so there's midnight 45, 1:05, 1:10, 15, and then suddenly, what I call these are log seams. So there's, if you guys see right there, it goes from 1:15, 1:15, 1:29, 1:30, and you get an error because database process has terminated abnormally. And then you come in here at 10 a.m., which is, hey, that's when I checked on this thing because I saw it. And so you'll see, this is what you're looking for. You'll see, like we had above, backup, completed, hey, good to go. And you'll just see that over and over again, especially if it's in the middle of the night and no one's using the system, for example. And then you'll get something like this, or you may actually see nothing at all. And what you'll start with is right here. This is the famous first line. It'll jump directly from like in the middle of a backup or something like that, where you see backup folder, backup ran, and then you'll suddenly see starting FileMaker Server processes. That is great evidence of a crash. And it's not necessarily a crash of FileMaker Server software, for example. That's the same thing that it would look like if the power plug was pulled on the machine, for example, which is another really common one. People like to trip over their power cables. And so you'll come in and look at this log file and it'll be like backup. And then, some IT person or actually I talked to somebody today and they had a service person come in and installing a security camera system in their thing. And they thought it would be a cool idea to unplug that white cable in the wall, which happened to be the customer's Mac Mini that's running FileMaker Server. And so they just kind of, unjacked it. And so then everything's down.
I can't tell you how many servers have been destroyed or shut down or blown up by janitors in the middle of the night. It's epic number. I mean, just unbelievable.
Honestly, one of the more common ways that this happens. I'm showing examples here of FileMaker Server crashing or something like that. And I'll just be honest, that's probably the second or third level of or second or third on the ranking of the reasons that FileMaker servers go down. At this point with 18, it's usually what I'll just generally call environmental. Somebody hit the power button, somebody tripped over a cable, power goes out at the facility, and the battery backup is unable to hold it long enough until power is restored. That's like the top reason.
Okay.
Call it power issues generally.
So Carol from Oakland's asking a question. So there's two conversations going here. So Scott Henderson has a 19 server that's running pretty good for him on a Mac. We've had problems on, I think, both of ours, right? On the ETS and
we have one 19. I don't know about the ETS machine actually. I haven't heard about that one.
Okay, but, so we have one for sure on that one machine. Maybe it's I guess it could be the hardware, but normally you'd have a kernel panic or something like that, or the drive DX would show a corrupted drive in progress, something like that. So basically, our general rule of thumb is that we always run behind on our server installations. We don't reuse the latest server software, largely because of that. At the end of the day, I don't, I just because someone ships software doesn't mean I want to be the first person to use it. You want to be the beta tester for it. So, so we have, I guess, two of them running. One's crashing, one's not. And then basically, Scott Henderson says that it's that he has a stable setup with his, which is great. And so someone's saying, I would say that yes, I would go. If I had to install a server right now, and it wasn't a test server, but it was for production, I would use 1804 right now, not 19. You can use 19 clients, which is fine, but 1804 on the server. Then Canberra says, pull the power cords. That's why you have a redundant power supply. Okay, I hate to break to Canberra. You think you're a smart guy. I can tell you don't know, because we had basically janitors who didn't speak English plugging in vacuums into the battery backups because they need an extra power cord. And they blew the smoke coming out of the battery backups, blew the servers, blew the battery backups, everything. So, in fact, I had an engineer one time who was a senior engineer that might work on your project when he was a junior engineer. We'll simply say that he was cleaning my office one day and he did the same thing, right? So, because you have battery backups, in no way, all that is another spot for you to plug a vacuum cleaner. So, and so I'm picking on Canberra, but I'm telling you, yeah, battery backups are great unless the junior engineer or the janitors who don't speak English with some company that I was visiting. I won't name who they are either. They would plug the battery. They needed a plug. The plugs were all full, so they plugged it into the back of the battery backup. It was really, truly an awesome experience for everyone. Yeah, Canberra says should be locked in a server room. Yeah. Yeah, and customers should always configure the servers correctly. Should have lots of backups, including offsite backups.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah.
It's a lot of shoulds. We give all those recommendations to our clients, of course. We're setting and recommending the best practices here at RCC. But again, it's a lot of shoulds. We for example, when we used to host on site, we would have multiple external hard drives plugged into the servers, and all of them would have backups running onto them. Most of our customers, just in general, unless they understand the large monetary value of their business, for example, especially companies that know their stuff's worth a lot, they'll spend the money. But most of our customers don't want to spend the money on 5 external hard drives or something like that. They're going to have one external, and that's good. Until it gets surged and the whole thing dies, and then you're hoping your Dropbox backups or OneDrive or whatever. Yeah, and per our recommendation about running FileMaker Server 18v4, Scott in Discord brings up an excellent point, which is that sometimes you have requirements outside of we recommend 18v4 currently still. Sometimes you have requirements outside of that. For example, they wanted, he had either his business or a client wanted card style windows in WebDirect, which is only supported in 19. So, all right, 19 is your choice here, if that's a requirement of yours. Back to the backup restoration. So I'm going to get rid of this one. This was just another example so that you all can see what randomly capping out will look like. So we're going to go back to the event log of the running server that we killed previously. So it's going to start up right here. You're going to see your FileMaker server, starting the processes. You get your little license information down here, and here's all the basics. So if I go all the way down here, what you'll notice as we configured this all together on Thursday and Friday is you never see opening databases. There's no hey, server's ready to go, open databases, because we don't configure that. We specifically turn that feature off, and I'll show you where that is because I want to re-emphasize that. So this option is always off on our servers, and that's why. Because right now, if this was on, you can see the admin console, so FileMaker Server's up and running, but it's just kind of waiting there for you to tell it what to do. If you had this feature enabled, as is the default, at least currently, out of the box from Claris, you would be looking at potentially databases that are open, actually. And so that has unknown veracity, and we don't endorse that, basically. We've had some customers that like to leave their servers in that configuration to have it run kind of fully automatically, and that's great, except that you basically run up the risk immediately of any crash causing corruption in your database. And while FileMaker Server will run a consistency check on the file if it knows it wasn't closed properly, that's a very narrow set of checks and will not, at most major kinds of corruption that are business affecting, it won't detect them. And so it'll go, oh great, and happily open the file up again, and that doesn't help you. So that leaves you with a business that doesn't know it went down over the weekend or something like that, and so you're working off of a crashed file, and that's never a good situation to be in. So back to the restoration here. As you can see, this is stopped, closed, and this database is here. So we're just using the test database for this example. Oh, I should have reloaded that. Oops, I should have said yes to that. My bad. Reload from disk. Yes, sorry. I wanted to see what it was doing. Oh, it told me I connected. Great. So yeah, and so you'll see logs like this going on. So as you can see, there's nothing in here. We get data API stuff, startup restorations disabled, maximum number of FileMaker use, license details and stuff like that. And so that's basically the end of it. So if your server is configured not to automatically open files, FileMaker Server, assuming it's not corrupted or crashed or your hard drive failed and like that's the problem, it'll just sit here waiting for you to tell it what to do. So we're going to do a restoration now. I'm going to go back and reference that actually. So we're up here and we see this. Yes, the schedule hourly completed, and that was the 1 p.m. At the beginning of the stream. Back up. And so we're going to come over here and we put our backups sort of in the default directory. On RCC installed AWS servers, generally there's multiple hard drives, and there will be like a databases hard drive, there will be a backups hard drive. If you have enough container data, there will be a container data hard drive. So, actually I'm doing it wrong. So, okay, cool. So we have a backups hard drive here. So I'm going to go in here. We're going to look at this timestamp again. We're going to go 1 p.m. today, right? Yep, 1 p.m. Great. We're going to find that backup, and that's going to be in here. And so I'm going to give you a tip here. You want to do this on Mac and Windows. You want to be copying these. You don't want to drag them. There's no drag and drop. Don't do that. We actually had, was it this spring? I think it was this spring. We had a customer who basically, right, they thought, oh yeah, cool, it's just like any other file. Drag and drop the databases over into the right folder. They had learned from RCC previously, watched our video course, and knew to, get rid of the old databases. And they had kind of the general concept of a database restoration down, but they made one crucial error, which is that they drag and drop this. And it doesn't matter as much on Windows specifically, but it's very critical on Mac that you copy and paste. And the reason for that is because these aren't actually real files. They're hard links. And so if you have to grab from in the middle, for example, you had that one where you have to go back 2 hours, and we're going to go back here and we're going to restore from this backup. Then you need to copy that out, because otherwise you can break the entire backup chain, and it will not actually bring the files over correctly anyway. And so what that customer had is they had drag and dropped the backup and put it live in the directory. And then about half of the databases, in fact, and I think they were the half that changed, came up read-only, because what had happened is Mac had redirected from where the backup location was to what is now the live databases directory, making a wonderful link and doing a smart computer thing that shot the business in the foot. And so they brought the database server back up online, thinking they'd done everything perfectly. And in about half of their databases, nobody could enter data. It kept telling them the files were read-only. And that was because FileMaker Server knew that wasn't a real file that it was operating on. It was looking at that and going, that's a hard link to the backup. I'm not supposed to be touching that. And so it refused, basically. So that's a sort of highly technical, but a fair warning. We're going to copy and paste. So I'm going to grab this. We're going to go here, and we're going to copy. We're going to come over. We're going to go to, we want to restore this to the FileMaker databases directory. So one of the other things that we do here, and I'm just going to do this, so we don't so unless you're completely out of disk space, we actually don't throw away the backups. What was the live database, I'm going to rename this here, we'll just call it crashed. So what that allows us to do is, for example, if during that time period between when the backup ran and your restore point, and this is really important for people that run something like daily backups, the database isn't necessarily fully dead, you just don't want to use it. And so if you want to hire somebody like us or do it in-house, you can go in and manually pull that data out. You have to export as CSV. You can't use FileMaker native database formats or anything like that when you're doing those exports. Otherwise, it'll bring the corruption with it, which is definitely not what you want. And so if you can export in some of plain text or whatever, right? And then you have to sit there and open it up in Excel or something like that and manually clean the data, and then you might be able to bring that back into what is now the live file, that backup that you restored from. So that's the short version of the process, but you can do that. And so we generally at least keep the old version of the crash databases around just in case somebody's like, hey, there's this one thing, they have a document they can't retrieve, some situation like there's some critical thing that's no longer, somebody called in on the phone and they didn't take notes or anything like that, right? Because they're using FileMaker. Then you can go back and potentially retrieve that critical piece of information. It's a huge pain and quite expensive, frankly, as far as both time and money to actually do that export and re-import process, just to be clear. But it is something, right? If it's enough money, then then the restoration process becomes cheaper than the downtime. So we're going to now paste this in the directory. And for most restorations, that's it, basically. Other than opening the databases, we're done. However, I'm going to note another thing here. If you are on a Mac specifically, especially for a lot of you that host maybe in your office or your home with a Mac Mini, great, we love it. I have no complaints about that at all. There will be one additional step to do here. So it's a little bit different on Windows, obviously. So you're going to have get info, which is the equivalent to this menu. And so at the very bottom, I wonder if I can draw one of these up here. Richard, do you mind if I show one of our servers, one of our Macs?
That's fine.
I want to show this menu just so that all right, so we'll show you a nice bugged out server here. This is actually the bug that we're dealing with right now, but I want to show you guys what this looks like. So let me bring this over. Dun, dun, dun. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to bring this on our screen. So this is one of our internal systems. So on Mac, your FileMaker Server directory is going to look like this. It'll be, probably your boot drive library FileMaker Server, and then within that, right, it's the same as on Windows. You'll have the data directory that's got your databases, the database server app, all this stuff. Your logs you'll be looking for in here. It's totally the same place. One thing that you want to be aware of on Mac is that depending on where you copy those backups from, you're going to paste them in here inside this data folder, right? Sorry, inside the data folder. The database files themselves will not necessarily bring the permissions over. So you're going to have to, after you paste it, you're going to have to get info. And what you want to look for is to make sure that this FM server user is on that list. So here, I'll hit the plus button so you can see what that looks like. It'll look like FM server user in this list. It'll be dark like administrators is because it'll be an option that you can pick. And you'll need to select that. You need to make sure that it has read and write permissions. You're going to click the lock here. Let me do this. Just so that we can see it. Whoops. So what the lock enables you to do is to hit this gear, and it gives you the option apply to enclosed items. You want to do that immediately before taking the databases live again, just to be sure, because sometimes the folders will get the right permissions, but not the databases, or the container data will, or there's some variation there. I'm not entirely clear on copying from what sort of volume results in the permissions being stripped on Mac, and so for us it's just a general blanket recommendation. You just do it because it can't hurt anything.
The answer, would you like the answer to that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the answer to that is if you're copying on the same drive, at least historically has been my experience, the permissions don't get wrecked. If you copy from another drive onto this drive for whatever reason, then it will lose its mind. Now I've zoomed in pretty closely here on your screen, but it's doing the freak out graphics thing, so people could see it because our resolution is set very, very low. It's hard to see that, but I've zoomed in on that a little bit.
It's the part of the menu is the sharing and permissions at the bottom of the get info menu, and you'll be doing that on the databases folder inside the FileMaker Server data directory.
What server are you on right now?
This is 13.
Okay.
You can see it bugging out in the background. You see the 100% CPU usage. This is the 19. For anyone who's watching, this is the 19 server that we were talking about. It's current. I'm waiting for it to crash to see if it's going to, or if it's just going to keep meddling along.
It's lost its mind. Yeah, it's going to crash. Yeah, so we're back to that issue again.
So so basically, just with that Mac specific note aside, we're just about done with the actual restoration itself. At this point, you'll go in, you'll see, hey, it's closed. You'll open your databases. Dun, 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 and we're live again. So that's the main of it. What you'll want to do after this is you can think about what kind of crashes happen, and if there's any steps you can take to help with that. For example, one of the more common issues on Windows, for example, we build our machines to work around this, but one of the more common issues on Windows, especially if you deal with a lot of container data, which is usually documents in the solution, Windows will not unprompted clean its own temp directory for hilarious and humorous reasons. This has been less of an issue with 18 and newer, or newer versions of 18, but at least historically with FileMaker, there's some scenarios under which it just apparently doesn't clean out the temp data from when you upload the container, and then it's got to hold it on the server and then put it where it goes. That isn't always cleaned up always. And so we make aware for our clients that do lots of container data work that they need to clean out that temp directory. I don't say manually, right? You can automate all this stuff, but you need to do that. Windows has a built-in tool called Clean Manager, which is this thing. It looks like this cleanup. We just recommend, if you're on Windows specifically, you can set up a schedule to run the Clean Manager. You can program in they're numbered, but you can basically pre-build a schedule and then run that automatically. We do that once a week, and basically after we did that, we stopped having issues where people's FileMaker servers would be taken down by, for example, the C drive filling or something like that.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
So it's cleaning the temp directory?
It is, yeah.
Okay, so how does it not clean a file that's actively being used by the server?
Because it only cleans, Windows only cleans things that are older than a certain time period, which is the issue, because FileMaker Server is not deleting those older files automatically.
Okay.
I
just wouldn't want it to clean a file that's being, a temp file
uploaded
that's being
currently.
Well,
Correct.
Yeah, see, that's the way this stuff works for a lot of you who don't understand this. And that is that as FileMaker Server interacts with things, or FileMaker Pro interacts with things, it creates an arsenal of temporary files that it munges and manages, and the more users, for example, every user that logs into FileMaker Server, the server is going to start a session temporary file with you effectively, and it's going to keep track of what globals you have and all that kind of stuff, and keep track of what you're doing, and it does that in this session file. It'll also write data sometimes that it can't write the database file yet for some reason. So one of the things that, once again, why you close a file correctly is that the server, and FileMaker Pro for that matter, will look at the temp data, determine if any of that data should be written back to the database file, and it will write it to that file. If for some reason you crash and that data is never written to the file, then that's why we say don't use a crash file. We're back to that conversation again, right? Listen, you kind of paved into it, and I bit my lip on it, but I'm done playing that game. So the reality with this is the sequence. This is the road to hell for all of you people, okay? This is how the road, because I've been there, personally been there. I know that for a fact. Here's the road to hell. You set up a FileMaker server. For whatever reason, it doesn't have as robust backups as you think it should. Then what happens is it crashes. And so, being the responsible adult that you are, you say to the customer, hey, let's import the data from the crash file into the last good backup, and you start to munch with that and play with that, and suddenly you realize it will take 8 or 12 or more hours for you to try to isolate specific bits of data and bring it over. It's a very painful process. Or you decide to run a recover on the file on a 15 gigabyte database or something like that. And that takes hours to accomplish. And so what happens is it goes from, I don't have a lot of backups, we can't use a crash database, we'll do some sort of remediation process, to, it's basically, the conversation looks like this. Whether you say it out loud or it's in your head, it's shit. The customer's phone's ringing. Ring, ring, ring. Where's our database? How come it's not running? You suck as a consultant. Ring, 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 ring. Stress, 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 stress. And at the end of the day, you go, shit, just use the crash file. And then it comes back up, and the customer goes, oh, really good. You're really good, you know? And you know that you've stepped one more step to the road to hell, right? And that's when it crashes and it doesn't come back, because it's never going to come back, because it's sufficiently destroyed that server and pro can't use it. So the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I would really recommend that you folks see that for what it is if you have to do this, you better be once, twice. I've got a customer literally that's doing it every other day. They're not actually our customer. They kind of ejected. They got mad at us. Nick Hunter got really preachy with them and said, "You guys can't be doing this." And they got really mad at Nick for being preachy. And I told him, I said, "Your server's going to quit working." And the guy goes, "You're threatening us." I said, "Now that's like physics, right? When you crash a file, it's going to one day decide not to open. We're like threatening you, right? What are you talking about? It's like physics. Like if you drive drunk, sooner or later you're going to kill yourself, someone else, or you're going to be in jail. Okay, just the way that is. And so when you have to point out that there's physics to people involved, they get grumpy with you. So understand that. Yeah. You don't want to be on the hook for when this happens to someone. You don't want to be anywhere near them when it blows up, right? Because it's just going to be ugly for everyone.
Stay out of the blast radius.
Yeah, stay out of the blast radius, yeah. Carol wants to know where exactly these temp files are located on the server.
See Windows temp. Do not delete them manually. Use Windows Clean Manager only. Do not delete them manually.
Okay, Canberra goes, "Hey, shouldn't I remove all these on my Mac?" No. Canberra.
Nope.
No, the Mac doesn't have the problem. It cleans it. The Windows doesn't for whatever reason, so it's a Windows function. So don't try to, don't invent problems where none exist. On the Mac, it's fine. I mean, it might crash for other reasons, but it won't be this.
Yep. I'll also say Claris has done some work to help with this with version 18 and newer. So I assume this applies to 19. I need to go look at the tech specs and confirm. I assume they wouldn't have changed it in a bad way anyway. But as of version 18, for example, if you're in that situation and basically your disk is filling because things aren't being deleted appropriately, and so eventually the main boot drive will fill. I mentioned it at one point. I don't remember if it was Wednesday or Thursday. They have a new amount of data. It used to be a megabyte, where if your boot drive, basically your boot volume was within a megabyte of full, it would try and emergency shut down the databases, which just isn't enough space. Basically, we have customers with 130 gigabyte FMP12 files, so that's not going to work. And so it would try and emergency shut stuff, and it just wasn't enough time to get it done if something was spiraling out of control, basically. And so as of 18 and newer, that new amount is if there is a gigabyte free on the boot drive. If it goes under a gig, FileMaker Server will emergency close your files for you. And I've witnessed it happen. The aftermath of it anyway. I wasn't watching it when it happened once, and it worked. Actually, it was just fine. What it looked like was kind of the equivalent of if I had gone in on the admin console and hit close really fast on close all databases, and it basically did that, and then was like, all right, cool, we're done. This is important. If you have email notifications, it will email you when it does that. It will say, hey, the boot drive was full. I have closed everything. Please come save me. And you need to go do that, actually. So, like I said, this has mostly only happened on Windows. We have had it happen once on a Mac for unrelated to the temp files issue reasons. But it can also theoretically happen there. It's the same behavior, though. So it'll look at its own boot volume, your Mac hard drive SSD or whatever it's called, and it'll look at that and say, hey, there's under a gig left, and it'll slap your files closed as fast as it can. So
all right, cool. Well, let me are we about wrapping up here? Are we getting close to the end on your part, Jake?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, there's only one other thing I wanted to talk about, which is that the thing, I don't know if you want me to cover it, I guess I'll ask, which is when the FM server helper D crashes and so you lose logging.
Okay, go ahead. Now's the time, because we're not going to be back to this anytime soon.
This is a very particular failure scenario, but it is the only thing that I have seen so far that contradicts anything I've told you all today, and so I just want to note it as a counterpoint, basically. So all of the restoration that we've done and everything that I'm going to tell you about incident response is focused around read the logs, find out what the server was telling you. Well, there is a bug in the product for certain versions, and it et cetera. It doesn't happen that often. It's a pretty rare thing. But very occasionally you will find yourself in a situation where you're coming into a server and you don't have logging. And what that is uh, there's a constellation of programs that make up a FileMaker server. There's of course the database engine, the data API, the web presentation engine that runs WebDirect, the admin console, etc. Right? There's all the little parts, and each of those is its own little process on the server, which is why you can see in the startup log that we were looking at earlier, it says, "Hey, starting this, starting that, starting the next thing." Those are processes it's launching. So one of those processes that is actually the one that handles the log file itself, among other tasks, is called the helper D process. It's usually called FM server helper D. I believe it shows up on Windows. Yes. So on Windows, it looks like this. On Windows, it is actually the thing that denotes the service, the Windows concept of a service of FileMaker Server. It launches all the processes, handles the logging, stuff like that.
Can you sort alphabetically for me if you're not already? Or are you right now?
It is.
Okay, so yeah, go back that. So this is for those of you who are kind of more inclined to be advanced. This is almost identical on the Mac, very similar. This group is basically they're separate applications, if you want to call it that. These are the programs that constitute an installation of FileMaker Server. And so in here is the database engine, the backup server. Where's the PSOS part of it? The script, is that the script engine right here?
That is script engine, yes.
Yeah, so this is the part that runs PSOS and SASE. Any one of these independently can fail. It can hang at full throttle. It could crash. It could disappear. And so what we're talking about is you being able to look at this on the Mac side or the Windows side and say, hey, this process is shot. And the question you have to ask yourself is can you restart that process and be reasonably assured that the server will come back to life without having to restart the whole server? And so Jacob has a better feel for this than I do. Which of these services can you restart, without restarting the whole box?
Let's see, admin console, which is a subset of the data API and the data API, the script engine, the web publishing engine, and I believe ODBC as well. Basically everything other than the three in the middle, the server, this thing backup server, which you have no control over, and then the helper, which is actually what's doing the restarts.
So these three here are kind of mandatory, and if they go down, then really, here's the thing: if you can afford a total system restart, then just do it. But sometimes it's useful just to restart if PSOS or SASE are dead, you can restart this and bring those back to life, which is kind of nice. So.
Yep. We have a client that's moving over to a FileMaker server, I think Friday, actually, this week, who is going because they are currently on FileMaker Cloud, which affords us none of this control. And so they have plugins in their script engine because they generate PDFs on the server, and they use a plugin for that. And so that thing will break, I don't know, once a month or once every 3 weeks or something like that. And then the script engine just dies, and it doesn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't come back up again afterwards. It's supposed to, but for various reasons it does not. And so on FileMaker Cloud, Cloud for AWS, the legacy version of that platform, you have to reboot the whole thing to get that back running again. And so one of the reasons that we're moving to FileMaker Server with that client actually is because we can restart these things independently. If their script engine fails, we'll get an email from somebody saying, hey, we're getting we're getting errors, and we can go in and just restart FMSE.
Assuming that it's not one of the core processes, right? It's one of these peripheral ones. So David's over here on the Discord. It's actually a pretty good conversation on Discord. It's great. And that is the idea of David says there's 7 processes plus Bonjour. Bonjour is the kind of its ability to kind of discovery, right? And it's kind of a Apple related discovery process, but what Windows Server works with 19 is David's question. I think it's
2016 and 2019.
Yeah, so there you go. And then someone, of course, was complaining the other day, well, how come I can't install FileMaker Server on Windows 10?
Ooh, that's a good one, but also a really easy question to answer. FileMaker Server runs a bunch of its stuff through IIS, which does not install on Windows 10.
There you go. And IIS is okay. You don't answer this.
Sorry.
This is a test question. So for Michael or someone, whoever wants to answer a test question, not smart people, David. David, You and I are going to have a chat. You and I have to chat. Like when I ask a test question, it's for like bunny kind of people, not smart people. Like, I mean, not that Bunny's not smart, but I'm talking about a guy who obviously could be presenting here. David is on Discord, could definitely be presenting here without a doubt. And then, of course, Bunny's filed a complaint that we weren't making a very bunny-friendly broadcast today. So I do apologize for that. So that's it for now. I appreciate it. I'll cut everyone loose. We'll catch you tomorrow for a very basic bunny kind of day. All right. Awesome, folks. Thank you.
Just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected the quarterback. Great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Trying to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap, stands in, throws it left for Amendola, reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10, rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.